the last thing I want to mention here, we are going to do a combined Easter service, Easter weekend, with our partner church in the Tom Watkins neighborhood, Freshwater Church. And so we are going to have a Good Friday service at their where they meet on Sunday mornings at the Freeway Ministry Building over near the corner of Kearney and Grant. We're going to do a Good Friday service there. We're going to start at 6:30 that night. And so there's not going to be any child care. It's going to be all families included. It'll be about an hour-long deal. We're going to do a Good Friday service there, and then we'll actually do a combined service on Sunday morning out at the park. And it's going to be a great time, which, by the way, if you have not been baptized, or you know your step is following through in obedience to the waters of baptism, that is going to be the next time we do a baptism. We're going to do it out at the park in the open. We're going to do it with Freshwater Church and just preach the gospel and display the gospel. And one of the ways we do that is through the waters of baptism. So let me know if you need to be baptized, want to be baptized, and we will arrange for that weekend. Okay. So this has been a decently long series. We're continuing on in growing. And we're going to do it this week, and we will conclude our series next week. And we wanted to kind of draw this out over 7 weeks because there were 7 different areas of growth that we wanted to really talk about with you. And this isn't coming in reaction or response to, hey, we need to grow this way, therefore we're going to pound this down and make sure we grow. This is more of a response to the growth we've been seeing and want to continue on and encouraging you, Redeemer, us, to continue to grow in these ways. So today we're going to be hitting on a growing stewardship. And that's why we are brought to 2 Corinthians chapters 8 and 9. Stewardship. It's a word that we use often. We even have a stewardship team with a stewardship leader. Stewardship, by definition, is this. It's a responsibility to manage all the resources of life for the glory of God, acknowledging God as provider. I'm going to say this again. This is a definition with a focus on the gospel. Stewardship is responsibility to manage all the resources of life for the glory of God, acknowledging God as provider. At Redeemer, we teach 100% stewardship. We teach that, meaning that we steward 100% of our money, not only our money, but our time, our energy, our relationships, our emotions, our possessions, our family, all of it, we steward 100% for the glory of God. And so this isn't a sermon about giving money, though that will be part of it, but this is a part of us taking responsibility and stewarding all we have, even our influence, 100% for the glory of God. We've seen our church grow in stewardship. In particular, we have seen a bump, a huge spike, if you will, in growing financially. Let me give you just an example, a testimony of our church family. For those of you who are outside the family of Redeemer, maybe you're new here and you haven't been a member yet, here's something we got to share with our folks at the turn of the new year. In 2019, 97% of our members gave financially to Redeemer. 97%. In the Southern Baptist world, which is kind of generally what we're a part of, 25 to 35% of members generally give to their church. 97% of our members are giving. I think that's astounding. I think that's not something where we just get to pat ourselves on the back and go, wow, look how amazing we are. But I think it's a testimony to what the Lord is actually doing in our hearts. The goal is not making money. The goal is not getting money. In fact, when we give our money, when we say give, we say do it as an act of worship. It's a tangible expression of what God is doing inside of our hearts, right? 97%. And so we see what Christ is doing in you. And it doesn't matter if you're poor or if you're wealthy, you are giving and you are growing in your stewardship. And we've seen this go out even more than just finances. If there's been a need, we've seen people meet those needs. We love saying in our family meeting, as far as we know, there are no needs within our church. And if there are needs, that are voiced, we are quick to meet those needs. So we are thankful for that. But even beyond that, if you need an ear, you need someone to just hear you out. If you just need to get something off your chest, you need to deal with something, our people, you guys are quick to offer an ear. If somebody's needing counseling or help, you're quick to offer counsel and help. Families, if you're needing a breather from your kids, just show up any Sunday and just ask another family, hey, can you take all my kids? And that's generally what will happen. You will have multiple families being willing to take your kids just so that you can have a breather. And so we've seen that generosity grow, and you've been exceedingly gracious. So thank you for giving not only all of these things, but giving regularly, giving sacrificially, giving generously, giving joyfully. And it is honestly a joy to lead you and to lead a people who are so gracious in their giving. And it's also a humbling experience at the same time. So I want to take you to 2 Corinthians chapters 8 and 9 as we talk about growing stewardship and redeeming. In short, Paul, the Apostle Paul, planted several churches kind of along the Mediterranean. And after he planted these churches, he returned to these churches asking them to give in order to take up a collection, money or resources, to help fund the poor Christians who are now in Jerusalem. So Jews who had converted to Christianity in Jerusalem are now facing persecution, and now they are becoming exceedingly poor. And so Paul is wanting to help them, and so he goes to the churches he helped plant to help fund these believers in Jerusalem. And there's a unique paradox that is going on here. You have these Gentile churches that are now located across the Mediterranean who are now giving to formerly Jewish people who are now Christians. You have to understand, the Gentiles were opposed. They were the outsiders. There was racial hostility and tension between Jew and Gentile. And now the people who were once enemies are now their closest friends and their closest allies. So Paul says, hey, this is a beautiful picture of the gospel, that Jesus comes and brings us together, and he helps do this by saying, hey, let's give of ourselves, let's give of our resources, let's give of our money to help bring unity in the kingdom and to help our suffering brothers and sisters. And so here today, in these chapters, Paul's going to show us a few things. He's going to show us that we are stewards of God's generosity. One, we are stewards of God's generosity. Secondly, Paul's going to show us is that we are enduring stewards. That we are enduring stewards. And third, that we are to be rejoicing stewards. This could be some tongue twister. Say it 2 times. But first, we are stewards of God's generosity. Chapter 8, verses 1 through 5. So Paul says, we want you to know, brothers, about the grace of God that has been given among the churches of Macedonia. For in a severe test of affliction, their abundance of joy and their extreme poverty have overflowed in a wealth of generosity on their part, for they gave according to their means, as I can testify, and beyond their means of their own accord, begging us earnestly for the favor of taking part in the relief of the saints. And this, not as we expected, but they gave themselves first to the Lord, and then by the will of God to us. So God has given a grace. That's what Paul starts out here. God has given a grace, and this grace is ultimately, we see in verse 2, revealed through human generosity. In the giving and the relief of the saints, so people giving to people, God is displaying his grace. In this grace, when does it come? Paul says, it comes at a time of severe testing and affliction and extreme poverty. Severe testing of affliction and extreme poverty. Paul's theme of affliction is, this doesn't just come in a vacuum. We see this in chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 4, and chapter 6. Paul talking about over and over, several times over, the affliction that he has to endure as an apostle for the sake of the church. And so Paul then shows that the church, even in their affliction, are being tested, are showing themselves to be extremely generous. And so, this is what's unique. Their affliction and their poverty did not cause the church to go, and what he's saying is not that they went into debt, not that they went and maxed out their credit cards, but what he was saying was, you gave way more than I was even expecting you to give, and beyond it. And so they gave sacrificially. They didn't give foolishly, they gave sacrificially. And then in all of this, they were eager to share God's generosity with others in verses 3 and 4. They gave what was expected and even more, but then they begged. They begged in verse 4 to be generous. And that word favor in there that we have in the ESV, the core word of that in Greek is grace. The church was begging to be generous with God's grace to their brothers and sisters. Even in their severe affliction and extreme poverty, they were saying, Paul, please let me have a chance to show this church how much we love them. And they gave then according, not to their own means or what they don't have, but according to the will of God. And what we see in that is this: God is the impetus of giving. He's the reason, He's the fuel, He's the energy, He's the purpose behind giving. Have you ever seen a parent pull a child aside and just say, what have I told you about obeying and saying yes all the time? Every now and then it would be good to hear from you a no. Have you ever heard a parent say that? Right? Never. Never has a parent ever said that. Why? Because when we were born screaming and crying and angry and just hating everything. And that's how we grow up as a child. As parents, we go gray because we're just begging our children to say yes one time. Just yes. And share even, right? No parent has ever had to unteach a child on sharing. Like, hey, quit sharing so much. Right? It's share. I'm going to take the stinking toy away. That's usually what it is. And I think we see that with generosity in the gospel. God is the one who is generous. And we become generous because He was generous towards us, and He teaches us then how to be generous. And so when we're generous, it's not, hey, God, let us show you how to be generous. It's, God, thank you for being generous to me. Now I wish and I desire, I beg that you would let me show that generosity to someone else. So church, we are agents. We are a means, we are a tool for God's generosity to the church and to really the nations. God is generous through His people. Yeah, there's times where people are not included, where God just shows up and He does things. But most of the time, whether it's a conversion story or a need is met, it's done through a person. Hey, God told me to tell you this. Hey, I felt the Lord tell me I just needed to give you this money. Or, hey, I heard this and so I wanted to do that for you. That's God working through His people to be generous to you. And so, have you ever noticed, I picked up on that before, that God's grace is connected to your stewardship, to your generosity. If God has made you a steward of all of your life, that is your money, your relationships, so on and so forth,
how might you need to consider how it is that you need to continue to grow in your generosity towards one another. God gave you what you have so that you can display it as it relates to others, not so that you can hoard it and have it for yourself and just store it away in a closet for no one else to see or keep. We live in a world where we boast in how hard we work to get the things that we have, and we just
ourselves on the back. Hey, a lot of hard work and grit, and look what I did for myself. But that's not how the gospel works. The gospel gives you no room, shifts your perspective entirely, saying you don't get to boast in yourself, but you only get to boast in the Lord. You have salvation not because you've done anything, but because of Christ for you. You don't have these things because you mustered it up in your own power. It's because God gave it to you. Now you have a stewarding responsibility to use it for His glory. So does your generosity then, Redeemer, reflect the God who generously gave to you? What does your generosity or lack thereof express to the world about the God you serve?